Jake Morrison pulled his coat tighter around his body as the wind howled through the frozen landscape. The storm had been raging for 3 hours now, and he could barely see 5 feet in front of him. Snow whipped across his face like tiny knives, and each step forward felt like walking through thick mud. He had lost contact with his team when the blizzard hit. One moment they were walking together across the ice plains of Kepler 442b, and the next moment the world turned white. The wind was so loud he couldn't hear his own voice when he tried to call out to them. His radio crackled with static, but no voices came through. The cold was getting worse. Even with his special military suit, Jake could feel the freezing air creeping into his bones. His fingers were starting to go numb inside his gloves, and his toes felt like blocks of ice. The heating system in his suit was working, but it wasn't enough to fight off this kind of cold. Jake checked his oxygen meter. The small screen showed he had maybe 2 hours of air left. That wasn't good. His team had been exploring this planet for a week, looking for signs of life or useful materials. They had found nothing but ice and rock. Now Jake was alone, lost in a storm that seemed to have no end. He tried to remember his training. Stay calm, find shelter, conserve energy. Don't panic. But it was hard not to panic when everything around him looked the same. White snow, gray sky, and wind that never stopped screaming. The ground under his feet was getting harder to walk on. Ice had formed a thick layer that made every step dangerous. Jake slipped twice, catching himself before he fell completely. If he fell and hurt himself out here, no one would find him. He would freeze to death before the storm ended. Something dark appeared in the distance through the swirling snow. Jake blinked hard, trying to make sure he wasn't seeing things. The cold sometimes made people see things that weren't there. But as he got closer, he could tell it was real. A mountain rose up from the frozen ground, its rocky sides dark against the white storm, and there, about halfway up the mountain, was a black opening. A cave. Jake felt hope for the first time in hours. Caves meant shelter from the wind. They were usually warmer than the outside, even if only by a few degrees. It might be enough to keep him alive until the storm passed. He started climbing toward the cave. The mountain was steep, but there were enough rocks and ledges to give him places to put his hands and feet. The wind tried to push him off the side, but Jake held on tight. His muscles were tired and his body was cold, but he kept moving up. The cave entrance was bigger than it had looked from the ground. Jake could walk into it without having to crawl. As soon as he stepped inside, the terrible sound of the wind became softer. The cave blocked most of it, though he could still hear the storm raging outside. Jake pulled out his flashlight and turned it on. The beam of light showed him a cave that went deeper into the mountain than he had expected. The walls were smooth, almost like they had been carved by tools instead of formed by nature. That was strange, but Jake was too tired and cold to think about it much. He walked deeper into the cave, looking for a good place to rest. His boots made echoing sounds on the stone floor. The cave was definitely warmer than outside, but it was still cold enough to see his breath when he exhaled. About 50 feet from the entrance, Jake found a spot where the cave widened into a small room. He sat down on the stone floor and leaned against the wall. For the first time in hours, he wasn't fighting against the wind. The relief was so great that he almost wanted to cry. Jake took off his pack and pulled out his emergency supplies. He had water, some food bars, and a small heating unit. The heating unit would use up his battery power, but he needed to warm up his body. He turned it on and held his hands over the small device. As the feeling came back to his fingers, Jake noticed something odd about the walls around him. There were marks carved into the stone. They looked like symbols or writing, but not like any language he knew. The marks seemed to glow very faintly in the light from his flashlight. Jake stood up and walked closer to the wall. The symbols were definitely glowing. Not bright, just a soft light that was barely visible. He reached out to touch one of them, and the stone felt warm under his fingers. That was impossible. Stone should be cold in a place like this. He pointed his flashlight deeper into the cave. The tunnel continued farther back into the mountain. More symbols covered the walls, all of them glowing with that same soft light. Jake had never seen anything like it. This wasn't a natural cave. Someone or something had made it. Jake sat back down and tried to think. He was a Marine, trained to handle strange situations. But this was beyond anything he had learned about. Glowing symbols in a cave on a planet that was supposed to be empty of life. His team needed to know about this, but his radio still wasn't working. He decided to set up his emergency beacon. It would send out a signal that his team could track, even through the storm. Jake placed the small device on the ground and turned it on. A red light blinked steadily, showing that it was working. Now all he had to do was wait. The storm would end eventually and his team would find him. Jake ate one of his food bars and took a drink of water. The heating unit was making the air around him warmer, and he was starting to feel better. But as he sat there in the quiet cave, Jake began to hear something that made his blood turn cold. It was very faint at first, almost like the sound of the wind. But as he listened more carefully, he realized it wasn't the wind at all. It was a voice. Coming from somewhere deeper in the cave, the voice was speaking, but Jake couldn't understand the words. They seemed to be in some other language, old and strange. The sound echoed off the walls, making it hard to tell exactly where it was coming from. Jake picked up his rifle and stood up slowly. His training told him to be ready for anything, but the voice didn't sound threatening. It sounded more like someone talking to themselves, or maybe singing a very quiet song. As Jake listened, the voice seemed to change. The strange words became clearer, and then suddenly he could understand what was being said. The voice was speaking English now, though. It still had that old, echoing quality. "Warm," the voice whispered. "Something warm comes to me." Jake felt his heart start beating faster. There was someone else in the cave, but who could be living in a place like this? And how did they know English? The voice spoke again, a little louder this time. "So long since I have felt warmth. So long since I have tasted life?" Jake raised his rifle and pointed it toward the back of the cave. Whatever was speaking didn't sound completely human. There was something wrong with the voice, something that made Jake's skin crawl. "First meal in 500 years, the voice whispered, and Jake could hear hunger in those words. Deep, terrible hunger that had been waiting for centuries. Jake realized he might not be as safe in this cave as he had thought. Jake kept his rifle pointed toward the darkness at the back of the cave. His finger rested on the trigger, ready to shoot if something dangerous came out of the shadows. The voice had gone quiet after speaking about a first meal, but Jake could still feel something watching him from the deeper parts of the cave. He reached into his pack and pulled out a flare. The small red stick would give him much more light than his flashlight. Jake cracked it open, and the cave filled with bright red light. Now he could see much farther into the tunnel that led deeper into the mountain. What he saw made his stomach turn cold. The walls were covered with bones. Not just a few bones, but hundreds of them. They were stuck into cracks in the rock or hanging from small ledges. Some were small, like the bones of animals. Others were much larger, bigger than human bones. They were all old and yellow, like they had been there for many years, but these weren't human bones. Jake had seen enough skeletons in his military training to know what human bones looked like. These were different. Some had too many joints. Others were curved in ways that human bones never curved. A few had strange bumps or spikes growing out of them. The bones belonged to creatures Jake had never seen before. Aliens. The voice spoke again, and this time it was closer. You see my collection, warm one? Each bone tells a story. Each skull holds memories of the hunt. Jake could see movement in the shadows now. Something large was shifting around in the deepest part of the cave. It was hard to make out the shape in the flickering red light of the flare, but whatever it was big. I have been sleeping for so long, the voice continued. Waiting for another traveler to find my home. Your warmth woke me up. Your life calls to me like a song. The creature moved closer, and Jake got his first good look at it. His blood turned to ice. It was like a nightmare come to life. The thing was at least 8 feet tall, with a body that looked like it had been put together from different animals. Its head was long and narrow, with a mouth full of teeth that were too sharp and too many. Its eyes glowed with the same soft light as the symbols on the walls. The creature's arms were too long for its body, and they ended in hands that had too many fingers. Each finger had a claw that looked like it could cut through metal. Its legs were bent wrong, like the legs of a giant spider, and it moved with a strange, jerky motion that made Jake's skin crawl. But the worst part was its skin. It looked like old leather that had been stretched too tight. Parts of it were torn or rotted away, showing dark meat underneath. The creature smelled like death and old blood. "You are different from the others," it said, studying Jake with those glowing eyes. "Most of the warm ones who find me are already dying when they arrive. Broken ships, failing life support, bodies torn by the cold. But you are still strong, still fighting." The creature took another step closer, and Jake could see that its mouth was already starting to open. Thick, dark liquid dripped from its teeth onto the stone floor. "I remember the first one," the creature continued, its voice getting hungrier. "A tall being with 4 arms and blue skin. It begged me to let it live. Promised me treasures from its homeworld. I ate it slowly, savoring each bite. The fear made the meat taste so much better." Jake felt sick, but he kept his rifle trained on the monster. "Stay back," he warned. "I'm armed and I know how to use this weapon." The creature laughed, and the sound was like breaking glass. "Oh, warm one," they all had weapons. "Look around you. Do you see any of them still using their weapons?" Jake glanced quickly at the bones on the walls. Now that he looked more carefully, he could see pieces of armor mixed in with the skeletons. Broken weapons lay scattered on the floor. Guns, swords, things that looked like energy weapons. All of them useless now. "I have been alive for over 1,000 years, the creature said. "I have eaten beings from 100 different worlds. Some were strong like you, some were smart, some had technology that could destroy planets. But in the end, they all tasted the same." The monster moved closer again, and Jake could see that it was getting ready to attack. Its claws were extending and its legs were tensing like springs. "But you know what I learned in all those years of hunting?" the creature asked. "The most delicious meals are the ones that fight back. The fear and anger and desperation, they make the meat so much more flavorful." Jake's mind was racing. He had to think of something fast. The creature was bigger than him, stronger than him, and it had been killing for centuries. His rifle might hurt it, but would it be enough to stop something that had survived for 1,000 years? "I can smell your fear," the creature said, taking another step forward. "It smells like the storm outside, cold and sharp and full of despair, but I can also smell something else. Something I have not smelled in many years." Jake waited, his finger tightening on the trigger. "Anger," the creature whispered. "You are not just afraid. You are angry. Most of the warm ones who find me are already broken by the time they arrive. They have given up hope. But you still think you can win." The creature's eyes seemed to glow brighter. "I like that. It will make eating you so much more satisfying." Jake knew he had to do something. The creature was getting ready to attack, and once it moved, he might not get another chance to fight back. But what could he do against something that had been killing for centuries? Then he remembered something from his training. When facing a superior enemy, don't fight them where they are strong. Find their weakness, change the rules of the fight. "You know what's funny?" Jake said, keeping his voice steady. "You keep talking about all these different aliens you've killed, but I don't think you've ever fought a human before." The creature paused, tilting its head to one side. "Human? Is that what you call your species?" "No, I have not encountered your kind before, but meat is meat, warm one. You will taste just as good as all the others." Jake smiled, even though he was terrified. "That's where you're wrong. You see, there's something different about humans, something that makes us special." The creature seemed curious now. "Oh? And what is that, little human?" Jake's smile got wider. "We're too stupid to know when we're supposed to give up." Before the creature could respond, Jake did something it didn't expect. Instead of backing away or trying to hide, he stepped forward and opened fire. The cave filled with the sound of gunfire as Jake emptied his entire magazine into the creature. The bullets hit it in the chest and face, and dark blood splattered against the walls. The creature screamed in pain and anger, a sound that was louder than the storm outside, but it didn't fall down. It didn't even seem badly hurt. The bullets had torn holes in its strange skin, but the wounds were already starting to close up. Within seconds, it looked almost as good as new. "Now you have made me angry," the creature hissed, its glowing eyes blazing with fury. "I was going to kill you quickly, but now I think I will take my time. I will eat you piece by piece, keeping you alive for as long as possible." Jake dropped his empty rifle and pulled out his combat knife. It was a small weapon compared to the creature's claws, but it was all he had left. "Good," Jake said, raising the knife. "I was hoping you'd want to do this the hard way." The creature lunged forward with its claws extended, moving faster than Jake expected. He rolled to the side just as the monster's razor-sharp claws scraped against the stone where he had been standing. Sparks flew from the contact, and Jake realized those claws could cut through almost anything. Jake came up from his roll and slashed with his knife, cutting a line across the creature's leg. Dark blood dripped onto the floor, but the wound healed almost immediately. The creature didn't even seem to notice the pain. "You cannot hurt me, little human," the creature said, turning to face Jake again. "I have been cut by weapons far sharper than your tiny blade. I have been burned by energy that could melt mountains. I have been frozen by cold that could stop time itself. Nothing can kill me." Jake backed away, keeping his knife ready. "Maybe, but I bet none of those other aliens made you work this hard for dinner." The creature attacked again, this time swinging both of its long arms at Jake. He ducked under the first swing and jumped back to avoid the second. The creature's claws hit the wall behind him, sending chunks of stone flying through the air. Jake noticed something important. The creature was strong and fast, but it fought like an animal. It used its claws and teeth, but it didn't think like a soldier. It had probably never faced anyone who knew how to fight back properly. "You know what your problem is?" Jake said, dodging another attack. "You've been picking on scared, desperate people for so long, you forgot how to fight someone who actually wants to hurt you." The creature roared in anger and charged at Jake like a wild bull. Jake waited until the last second, then stepped to the side and stuck his knife out. The creature ran right into the blade, and this time Jake managed to drive it deep into the monster's side. The creature screamed and spun around, trying to grab Jake with its claws. But Jake was already moving, pulling his knife out and jumping back. The wound started to heal, but it took longer this time. The creature was getting tired. "Impossible," the creature gasped, dark blood running down its side. "You should be dead. By now, you should be begging for mercy." Jake wiped the creature's blood off his knife. "Sorry to disappoint you, but humans don't give up that easy." The creature's eyes glowed brighter with fury. "I will tear you apart slowly. I will make you watch as I eat your arms and legs. I will keep you alive until there is nothing left but your head." Jake smiled grimly. "You can try. But first, let me ask you something. In all your years of hunting, have you ever wondered why so many different species ended up on this planet? Why they all found their way to your little cave?" The creature paused, confused by the question. "They were travelers, explorers. They came here by accident." "Really?" Jake said, circling around the creature slowly. "Don't you think it's strange that so many different aliens all happened to crash on the same planet? All happened to find the same cave? All happened to wake up the same hungry monster?" The creature's glowing eyes flickered. "What are you saying? Human?" Jake kept moving, forcing the creature to turn to keep facing him. "I'm saying this wasn't an accident. Someone or something wanted all those aliens to find you. Someone set this up." The creature shook its head. "No, that is impossible. I have been alone here for centuries. No one knows about this place." "Then explain the symbols on the walls," Jake said, pointing to the glowing marks carved into the stone. "Those aren't natural. Someone made them." "Someone? Who knew you were here?" The creature looked at the walls, and for the first time Jake saw something other than hunger in its eyes. He saw confusion, and maybe a little fear. The symbols have always been here, the creature said, but its voice wasn't as sure as before. They were here when I first arrived on this world. Jake stopped moving and looked directly at the creature. You didn't always live in this cave, did you? You came here from somewhere else. Something made you come here. The creature's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Jake could see that his words were having an effect. The monster was starting to remember things it had forgotten. I was hunting, the creature said slowly. I was following a ship full of warm ones. They landed on this world and ran into the caves. I followed them, but the creature's eyes went wide, but they were not afraid. They were leading me somewhere. They wanted me to follow them. Jake nodded. And when you got to this cave, what happened? The creature looked around at the glowing symbols on the walls. The walls began to glow. The symbols lit up like fire. And then ... double quote, and then you couldn't leave. Jake finished. You've been trapped here ever since. The creature stumbled backward, its claws scraping against the stone floor. No, that cannot be true. I am the hunter. I am the one who traps others. Jake pulled out his scanner and pointed it at the walls. The device beeped and showed him energy readings that were off the charts. This whole cave is some kind of prison. Those symbols aren't decorations. They're part of a containment system. The creature roared in denial. I am free. I hunt as I please. I eat who I want. When was the last time you left this cave? Jake asked. The creature opened its mouth to answer, then closed it again. It tried to think, but Jake could see that the memories weren't there. You can't remember, can you? Jake said. Because you've never left. Every meal you've had for the past 500 years has come to you. You've been sitting here like a spider in a web, waiting for prey to wander in. The creature's breathing became heavy and fast. Who would do this to me? Who would dare to trap me like an animal? Jake looked at his scanner again. The energy readings were getting stronger, and the symbols on the walls were glowing brighter. I don't know who built this prison, but I'm starting to think they built it for a reason. The creature suddenly turned and ran toward the back of the cave. Jake followed, keeping his distance. The tunnel went deeper into the mountain, and the walls were covered with more of the glowing symbols. The creature ran faster and faster, desperate to find a way out. But after a few minutes of running, they came to a dead end. The tunnel simply stopped, blocked by a solid wall of stone. The creature threw itself against the wall, clawing and biting at the rock, but the wall wouldn't break. Let me out. The creature screamed. Let me out. Jake walked up behind the creature slowly. You really don't remember, do you? You don't remember how you got here. You don't remember who you were. Before, the creature turned to face Jake, and its eyes were wild with fear and confusion. I am the hunter. I am the eater of worlds. I am the one who brings death to all who oppose me. No, Jake said calmly. You're a prisoner, just like all those aliens you killed. The only difference is they chose to come here. You were forced. The creature's legs gave out, and it collapsed to the ground. This cannot be true. I am powerful. I am feared across the galaxy. Jake knelt down next to the creature, but kept his knife ready. Maybe you were once, but now you're just a guard dog, sitting in a cage, waiting for your masters to throw you scraps? The creature looked up at Jake with its glowing eyes. If what you say is true, then why are you here? Why did you come to this place? Jake smiled and pulled out his scanner again. The device was picking up more energy signatures, coming from even deeper in the cave system. Because I think your masters are still here, and I think it's time someone had a talk with them. Jake helped the creature to its feet, though he kept his knife ready. The monster looked confused and broken, nothing like the terrifying hunter it had been just minutes before. Its glowing eyes were dim now, and it moved slowly like it was very tired. Show me, the creature said in a quiet voice. Show me these energy readings you speak of. Jake held up his scanner so the creature could see the screen. The device showed dozens of energy signatures coming from deeper in the cave system. Some were small and weak, but others were huge and powerful. There are passages down there that my scanner can detect, Jake explained. Hidden rooms. And something biggest powering all those glowing symbols on the walls. The creature studied the scanner for a long moment. I remember now, there were times when I heard sounds coming from below. Voices speaking in languages I did not know. But whenever I tried to find the source, the walls would glow brighter and I would forget what I was looking for. Jake nodded. The containment system. It's not just keeping you in this cave. It's keeping you from remembering things, keeping you from asking questions. The creature looked down at its claws, then at the bones scattered around the cave floor. All those beings I killed. They were not just lost travelers, were they? I don't think so. I think they were sent here on purpose. Someone wanted you to have food. Someone wanted to keep you alive and trapped. The creature's eyes began to glow brighter again, but this time with anger instead of hunger. Then whoever did this to me will pay. I will tear them apart slowly. I will make them suffer as I have suffered. Jake put his hand on the creature's arm. Hold on, let's figure out what we're dealing with first. My scanner shows there's a way down, but it's hidden. They walked back toward the main part of the cave, with Jake studying his scanner and the creature looking at the walls with new eyes. The symbols were everywhere, carved deep into the stone and glowing with that soft light. Here, Jake said, stopping near one section of wall. The energy readings are strongest here. There's something behind this wall. The creature moved closer to the wall and sniffed the air. I can smell something, metal, electronics, and something else. Something that smells like ... as it paused, confused, like me. Jake ran his hands over the wall, looking for some kind of switch or hidden button. The symbols here were different from the others. They were arranged in a pattern that looked almost like a code. Try touching the symbols, Jake suggested. Maybe they respond to you? The creature placed one of its claws on the wall. As soon as it touched the stone, the symbols began to glow much brighter. There was a low humming sound, and then part of the wall slid away like a door. Behind the wall was a metal corridor that led down into the depths of the mountain. The walls were made of some kind of smooth metal that reflected the light from the symbols. The air coming up from the corridor was warm and smelled like machinery. This is not natural, the creature sighed, staring down the corridor. This was built by someone with advanced technology. Jake checked his scanner again. The energy readings were much stronger now that the door was open. There's something big down there. Something that's been running for a long time. They started walking down the corridor together. Jake kept his knife ready and the creature's claws were extended. Neither of them knew what they might find, but they both knew it was important. The corridor was longer than Jake expected. They walked for several minutes, going deeper and deeper into the mountain. The walls were covered with the same glowing symbols they had seen in the cave, but these were arranged in more complex patterns. Wait, the creature said suddenly, stopping in the middle of the corridor. I know this place. I have been here before. Jake looked at the creature with surprise. You remember being here? The creature nodded slowly. It is coming back to me. I was brought here, not willingly. I was captured and dragged down this corridor. By who? Jake asked. The creature closed its eyes and concentrated. Beings in metal suits. They had technology I had never seen before. They were not afraid of me, even though I had just destroyed their ship and killed half their crew. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. What happened then? They put me in a room. A room with walls covered in symbols. Like these. They said they were going to keep me there until I learned to be useful. But I was too strong. I broke free and ran back to the upper cave. But you never left the cave system, Jake pointed out. The creature's eyes opened wide. Because I could not. Every time I tried to leave, the symbols would glow and I would forget why I wanted to go. I thought I was choosing to stay. I thought I was hunting. But I was just doing what they wanted me to do. They reached the end of the corridor. In front of them was a massive metal door with symbols carved all over it. The door was at least 12 feet tall and looked like it was made of some kind of metal that Jake had never seen before. Jake's scanner was going crazy. Whatever's behind that door, it's putting out more energy than a nuclear power plant. The creature approached the door and placed both claws on the metal surface. The symbols began to glow, and there was a sound like machinery starting up. The door split down the middle and slowly opened. What they saw inside made both of them stop and stare. The room was enormous, much bigger than the cave above. The walls were covered with screens showing images of different planets and star systems. In the center of the room was a huge machine that looked like it was made of crystal and metal. The machine was humming with power, and beams of light were shooting out from it to different parts of the room, but that wasn't the most shocking thing. The most shocking thing was what was standing next to the machine. It was a human wearing a uniform that Jake recognized. The uniform was from Earth's military, but it was a style that wouldn't be invented for at least 50 years. The human was tall and had gray hair, and he was working at a control panel next to the machine. "Hello, Jake," the human said without turning around. "I've been waiting for you." Jake felt his world turn upside down. "How do you know my name? Who are you?" The human finally turned around, and Jake saw that his face was older and more weathered, but familiar. Very familiar. "I'm you, Jake," the human said with a sad smile. "I'm you from about 60 years in the future. And I'm the one who built this prison." The creature roared in anger. You are the one who trapped me here." The older Jake nodded. "Yes, I'm sorry about that, but it was necessary. You see, in my time, this creature destroyed 17 entire worlds before we figured out how to stop it. We had to send me back in time to make sure it never escaped." Jake felt like he was going to be sick. "That's impossible. Time travel isn't real." "It will be," the older Jake said. "Humans developed the technology in about 40 years. And when we do, we discover that our biggest enemy isn't aliens or monsters, it's time itself. There are things in the universe that shouldn't exist, and sometimes the only way to stop them is to go back and prevent them from ever becoming a threat." The creature was moving toward the older Jake, its claws ready to strike. "You used me. You made me into a prisoner. You fed me other beings like I was your pet." "I'm sorry," the older Jake said. "But those aliens you killed, they were criminals. Murderers and destroyers from different worlds. We sent them here to feed you instead of letting them hurt innocent people." Jake's mind was reeling. So this whole thing, the cave, the symbols, the creature ... it's all part of some kind of time travel plan? The older Jake nodded. "The universe is more complicated than you can imagine, Jake. There are forces out there that can destroy entire galaxies. And sometimes the only way to stop them is to become something you never thought you could be." The creature was getting closer to the older Jake. "I do not care about your reasons. I only care about my freedom." "I know," the older Jake said sadly. "And that's why I'm here. It's time to end this. All of it." The creature lunged toward the older Jake with its claws extended, but something strange happened. As soon as it got close to the machine in the center of the room, it stopped moving. Its whole body froze in place like it had hit an invisible wall. "The containment field," the older Jake explained. "I can't turn it off until this is finished." Jake stared at his older self, trying to understand what was happening. "Finished? What do you mean finished?" The older Jake walked over to one of the control panels and began typing commands. The screens on the walls changed, showing different images. Jake could see space battles, destroyed planets, and creatures even worse than the one trapped in the cave. "In my timeline," the older Jake said, "humanity becomes the most powerful species in the galaxy. But with that power comes responsibility. We discover that there are things in the universe that exist only to destroy. Ancient beings that feed on entire civilizations. Machines that turn planets into weapons. Creatures like our friend here that can eat all life on a world." The creature struggled against the invisible barrier holding it in place. "Let me go. I demand my freedom." "Freedom?" The older Jake laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You destroyed 17 worlds. Billions of innocent beings died because of you. What freedom do they have?" Jake walked closer to the machine, studying its strange design. "So you built this prison to keep it trapped. But why here? Why this planet?" "Because this planet is special," the older Jake replied. It exists at what we call a temporal crossroads. Time moves differently here. What seems like 500 years to you has only been about 50 years in the rest of the galaxy. Jake felt a headache coming on. Time travel was making his brain hurt. So you've been running this prison for 50 years? Not just running it? Perfecting it. You see, the creature isn't the only thing we've captured. There are dozens of other prisons like this one, scattered across time and space. Each one holds something that could destroy the galaxy if it ever escaped. The older Jake pressed another button, and new images appeared on the screens. Jake could see other caves, other containment facilities, and other creatures that made his blood run cold. The thing is, the older Jake continued, maintaining these prisons requires someone to watch over them. Someone who understands the technology and can make sure the containment fields never fail. Jake was starting to understand where this was going. And you want me to take over? Not want, need. I'm old, Jake. I've been doing this for 60 years, and I'm tired. The time stream is starting to reject my presence here. If I stay much longer, I'll create a paradox that could tear reality apart. The creature managed to speak, despite being frozen in place. What about me? What happens to me in your grand plan? The older Jake looked at the creature with something that might have been pity. That's up to Jake. He can keep you imprisoned like I have. He can try to rehabilitate you. Or he can find a way to end your existence peacefully. Jake shook his head. This is insane. I'm just a Marine. I don't know anything about time travel or cosmic responsibility. You'll learn, the older Jake said. I did, and you have something I didn't have when I started? What's that? You've seen what happens when someone fights back against impossible odds. You've seen that humans don't give up even when they should. The older Jake walked over to a different control panel and began shutting down various systems. The humming of the machine got quieter, and some of the lights on the walls dimmed. I'm transferring control of the facility to you, he said. The computers will teach you everything you need to know. How to operate the containment fields. How to monitor other prisons across the galaxy. How to identify new threats before they become unstoppable. Jake felt panic rising in his chest. Wait, what about my team? What about my life on Earth? The older Jake smiled sadly. Your team will find your emergency beacon in a few hours. They'll assume you died in the cave-in that I'm about to trigger. You'll be listed as killed in action, and your family will be told you died a hero. But that's not true, isn't it? The older Jake asked. You're about to take on the responsibility of protecting the entire galaxy. If that's not heroic, what is? The creature managed to turn its head slightly. Human, if you take his place, you will become like him. Cold, calculating, willing to sacrifice anything for your greater good. The older Jake nodded. It's true. This job will change you. It has to. You can't protect the galaxy while still thinking like someone who only cares about one world. Jake looked around the room at all the screens and controls. What if I refuse? What if I just walk away? Then the containment systems will eventually fail, the older Jake said. The creature will escape. In about 5 years, it will reach a populated world and begin feeding again. In 10 years, it will have destroyed enough worlds to become unstoppable. And, the other prisons? Jake asked. They'll fail too, one by one. Within 20 years, the galaxy will be full of monsters and machines that exist only to destroy. Within 50 years, there won't be any intelligent life left anywhere. Jake sat down on the floor, overwhelmed by the weight of what he was being asked to do. So I have to choose between my life and the lives of everyone in the galaxy? Yes, the older Jake said simply. I'm sorry. I wish there was another way. The creature spoke up again. There's another way, human. Kill me, end my existence, and remove the need for this prison. Jake looked at the creature with surprise. You want to die? I want to be free. If I cannot have freedom in life, then I will take freedom in death. I am tired of being used as a tool by others. The older Jake shook his head. It's not that simple. The creature's death would release energy that could tear a hole in reality. The explosion would destroy this entire solar system. Jake stood up and walked over to the control panel. He studied the displays, trying to understand what he was looking at. What if we found a different solution? What if we could modify the containment system? What do you mean? The older Jake asked as Jake pointed to one of the screens. You said this creature destroyed 17 worlds. But it did that because it was hungry and angry. What if we could find a way to feed it without killing innocent people? Impossible. It feeds on living beings. There's no substitute. Maybe not. But my scanner picked up some interesting energy readings from the creature. I think it doesn't just feed on flesh. I think it feeds on life energy itself. The older Jake frowned. Go on. The machine in the center of this room generates massive amounts of energy. What if we could modify it to create artificial life energy? Give the creature what it needs. Without anyone having to die? The creature's eyes grew brighter. You would do this? You would find a way to feed me without making me a killer? Jake nodded. If it's possible. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than they are. The older Jake looked at Jake with something like pride. I never thought of that. In all my years of running this prison, I never considered rehabilitation. Instead of punishment. That's the difference between us, Jake said. You've been doing this alone for 60 years. You've forgotten that the best human solutions come from working together. The older Jake began typing commands into the computer. It might work. The technology exists. It would take some time to modify the systems, but it's possible. How long? Jake asked. Maybe a year, maybe 2. You'd have to stay here and work on it. Jake looked at the creature, then at his older self. And after that? After that, you could go home, live your life. The creature would be fed and contained, but not tortured. And I could finally rest. The older Jake finished his typing and turned to face Jake. But it means trusting a monster that has killed billions. Are you sure you can do that? Jake looked at the creature, seeing something in its glowing eyes that he hadn't noticed before. Not just hunger or anger, but hope. Everyone deserves a second chance, Jake said. Even monsters. Especially if humans are the ones offering it. The older Jake smiled, and for a moment he looked like the young Marine. Jake remembered being. Then let's get to work. We have a galaxy to save, and we're going to do it the human way. Jake picked up his tools and began to study the machine. Outside, the storm was ending, and somewhere in the distance, his team was searching for him. But Jake Morrison had found his real mission. Not just to survive, but to prove that humans could find better solutions than anyone thought possible, even in the darkest cave. Facing the oldest monsters, humanity's greatest strength wasn't weapons or technology. It was the simple belief that things could always be better, and the willingness to work until they were.